Hi, everyone. I'm Sonia Domarco, a country manager of Radioplayer in Spain. And it's a pleasure for me to be here and to have an event like this here in my home city, thanks to WorldDAB, Jackie, and her amazing team. So thank you. And now I am happy to be hosting this session with Laurence Harrison called Seamless Listening, Linking Broadcast and Apps. Laurence is the Chief Partnerships Officer in Radioplayer and board member in WorldDAB and Radio DNS. He leads the partnerships with the automotive industry on behalf of all of us and the entire radio industry to create the best radio experience in connected cars that we see in a moment. So welcome, Laurence. Thank you very much for coming to Madrid, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Sonia. Hola. Buenas tardes. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
It's great to see you all. It's the last session before coffee. Eyes are getting a bit droopy, maybe. But don't worry, because we're going to have you on the edge of your seat by showing you and talking about a new innovation. The guys at WorldDAB have asked us to talk about the linking from broadcast radio to apps, something that Thomas and Tobias just talked about as part of the Radio Ready initiative. But before we dive into that subject, I did just want to take a moment to introduce Radioplayer for those of you that don't know us. I'm sure many of you do. Radioplayer is an organization backed only by radio broadcasters, acting strategically on their behalf to keep radio prominent and strong in the car. We're partnering with 15 car maker brands to help do that. We're powering over 4 million cars on Europe's roads today, and our main focus is hybrid radio. That's broadcast, DAB+ and FM at the heart of an experience that works alongside IP. We're really proud to be working with the Radio Ready for Connected Cars initiative. We've been doing a lot of work over the last few months on this particular feature that we're going to be talking about. But we do see ourselves as the key delivery mechanism for the three pillars around radio prominence, a great UX, including voice, and the access to broadcaster apps that I'm going to be talking about. But just one final thing, a very quick update and announcement. We're delighted that actually 15 has become 16, and we are now partnering with the Chinese electric vehicle manufacturer XPeng. We're delighted that these guys want to create a broadcast hybrid radio experience, a world-class one, and we're really proud to be working with them on that. Thank you. So, that was a quick update. Let's dive into the subject at hand. So, why would we want to link broadcast radio and apps in the first place? Well, I think everybody here understands that with the introduction of Google's Android Automotive operating system, there are now two environments. You've got the broadcast radio, the hybrid radio. You've also got app stores, the ability for the user to download any apps. And many of those could be broadcaster apps. What we want to do is take away the complexity of the two environments and make it easier to access for the user. So some of those broadcaster apps might contain exclusive content only available in the app. And if you can go in through the radio button and get out to all that content, we see that as a key user benefit. We think it could provide a really simple journey. One way in to all the radio content through to apps via the radio button. And that, because it's the radio button we're talking about here, that helps to maintain radio's prominence in the car. When we've been thinking about this, there's a few things that we've considered, and they've all revolved around the user journey. Thomas talked about that's got to be at the center of all the developments we make. So what are the things that we need to consider? Well, certainly a solution. What happens when an app isn't already downloaded? That could be a point of friction. That still needs to be downloaded. If you're driving, there's probably driver distraction rules implemented by the car makers that would prevent you from doing it until you then park and you're stationary. So understanding that user journey with our car maker partners is really important. We've also believed that if you're going in through broadcast hybrid radio, there should be a simple way back if you've been to the app to come back into the broadcast radio experience. We think there should be deep links to contextual content. If you're listening to something specific and you want more, you should go straight to that content in the broadcaster app. And really importantly for us, it must work for all broadcasters. Not everybody has an app, And we think there are ways we can bring features to life for those broadcasters that are part of Radioplayer. But one thing we know for absolute certainty is that this can only be delivered through collaboration between broadcasters and car makers, the sort of collaboration that we've been doing in Radioplayer for years and that Thomas and Tobias just talked about through the Radio Ready initiative. So I'm very briefly going to step you through what we've done as an example. Some of you may have already been to the hybrid demo that we have upstairs. But what we've done is, through our amazing head of product, Jörgen Torvmark, who some of you may know, we've developed a hybrid application, a demo app. And within that, this is in Google's Android Automotive operating system. And within that, we're showcasing 3 ways that we think you can make that link to the broadcaster apps from hybrid radio in a way that is beneficial for the user. So I'm just going to step you through it. If you want a live demo, you can go and see it afterwards. But just to step through it, first of all, and I cannot emphasize this enough, the starting point, you can see the radio button on the right-hand side. That's your way in. You go in through the broadcast hybrid radio, DAB+, FM. And once you're in, the first way that we think you can access the app is if the app is already downloaded, it's available. As Thomas just showed, that should just be simply highlighted. This is an A to Z station list. Again, this would be a working hybrid radio. It just signposts that the app is available. And if you click on that, you would just go, for example, into the homepage of the app you could explore. One thing that's really important is, if you're listening to a station on DAB, for example, and you go into the app, that station would continue playing on DAB until you choose some content in the app. I think that's really important. So that's the first way. Now, of course, as part of that, if the app isn't available, it's available in the App Store but not yet downloaded, we would show a download sign. So that could either be in the A to Z list, or it could be in the Now Playing page. And that shows that an app is available but not yet downloaded. So the user has an option to download it at that point. If they choose to do that, again, I think we've got some work to do on the user journey here with our car maker partners. But let's say you're stationary, it might be prompted to do that when you stop. Then you would simply install the app and you're off and running. The second way is if the app is already installed, you're listening to a station like BBC Radio 6 Music, and you want to find out more. You're enjoying the content you're listening to. You like the station, or you like the presenter, or you like the show, the song, and you want to find out more. If you press the More button, it could take you to, and this is obviously a demo slide, a list of sort of sister stations, for example, or shows and podcasts that are relevant to the content you're listening to. But these are deep links, and when you select that, it would play inside the broadcaster's app. The third way is you may have noticed this sort of timeline bar along the middle here. So if, for example, you can see there you've started listening to a show, and either you want to go back to restart the show you're listening to, or restart the show that was on before that. And if we have the right metadata and streams from the broadcaster, you could, for example, press that icon, and maybe you're prompted, do you want to restart this show on the broadcaster app? And if you select it, it would automatically go through a deep link to play that content. Again, we think that's actually adding to the user experience here, but the way into it is through the broadcast hybrid radio. So those are the 3 ways that we're sort of showing in the app upstairs. Thank you very much. I've stepped through it. I know Sonia's got a few questions, but I hope that's interesting. We'll come back to that, and you'll be able to see the demo upstairs.
Thank you very much, Laurence, for your presentation, and congratulations, because Radioplayer is really innovating to keep radio strong in cars. And it's fantastic, of course, for the broadcasters, also for the listeners. But what about the automotive industry? What does the reaction from the industry?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think in terms of the broader industry reaction, obviously we heard from Thomas and Tobias, there are a lot of broadcasters out there who have automotive apps already, and they're super pleased about this. It's worth saying that I'm sure the number of broadcasters with apps will increase, and therefore this feature will broaden out. But we want to make sure it works for everyone. So I'll come back to that later. In terms of the automotive industry, I think it's been overwhelmingly positive. A lot of the car makers that have invested in Android Automotive and have an app store already do want to kind of signpost its availability and signpost some of the apps there. Equally, they want to make sure that actually the investment they've put into hybrid radio, for example, isn't lost. So this kind of user journey seems to resonate and sort of make sense to them. And so, yeah, I think it's fair to say we've had a lot of enthusiastic interest.
It's fantastic for the radio industry also. And what about prominence? Because I'm listening to the word prominence many times this morning. And how does this solution help radio prominence?
Well, I think we've always thought that you can make a really strong case for radio's prominence if the user experience is a fantastic one and if the user sees real value in the proposition. If we can develop something that puts additional value onto the radio, through the radio button, I think we stand an even better chance of securing the prominence in the future. And so I think highlighting things like this and showing user journeys that kind of make sense, you know, you can get into more content, more radio content from radio broadcasters, that I think that will make the conversation about prominence easier at a time when it's actually quite challenging with all the competition in the dashboard. So yeah, we think it's a positive step, and especially going in through the radio button.
And talking about the future, can you tell us more about next steps with this new feature?
Yeah, well, we're going to keep developing that, and I mentioned my colleague Ole Jürgen. You can speak to him about what plans we've got to sort of enhance, develop this feature. I talked about, again, for us, it's about those user journeys and making that as frictionless as possible. But the other thing we want is everyone's feedback. You know, this is a collaborative effort, and we'd love to hear your feedback if you come and talk to us directly or come and see the demo. We've had lots of feedback already. We'll continue working with the guys in the radio initiative we heard about earlier, and that's really important. But ultimately, I think what we're going to want to do is do some form of testing with consumers and get this feature live out into the market, because that's when you really start to learn about the value of what you've got. So, you know, those 3 steps are really important to us.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I have time for another question. Yeah?
One moment, please.
Okay.
Stay with me on the stage, okay?
Okay.
Because the moment is fascinating. Look at the word broadcast, meet and visit audio. And now it is time for your question. Wanna questions? Okay.
Yeah, hello. Vlastimil Navrátil, Škoda Auto. I would like to ask you, you showed us that there is some possibility to download some application. Now you showed the BBC, but what about the others? Does it mean that every broadcaster or station must have some dedicated application for these purposes?
So as I showed before, so there's 2 parts to what we've shown. The first one is if a radio station has their own app, then, for example, it could be signposted, as we showed in the list, or the user would be made aware of it. The other part of what we've shown is the more feature. And we want to make sure that we think that's quite a compelling feature. And I think we've got thousands of radio broadcasters in Radioplayer. And, for example, if they have an app, the more feature could go to the app. If they don't, we will be delivering the content for them. So if they're providing us with on-demand, podcasts, catch-up shows, and someone has pressed more, we'll provide access to that natively in the hybrid radio. So it would work if you have an app, but it would also work if we have the content, we could provide it natively in the app. And we want to make sure that works for everybody.
Okay, other question? Here? Is it possible? You? No?
Coffee time.
One moment, because I have a question, Lizzie. Is possible? One question? Okay. It is encouraging to see the European broadcaster working together. Okay, speak now. Yes.
Sorry, so it's encouraging to hear that we're working together with...
The question now?
Yeah.
Sorry. It is encouraging to see the European broadcaster working together?
Yes. Yes. It's really encouraging in Australia that we've been able to achieve that. And, you know, getting all the commercial networks together is one thing, as Tobias would know. and the experience that you guys have had then bringing public as well along. And we have two different public broadcasters. So we have the ABC and SBS, and they actually have different funding models. And then we've actually also brought the community broadcasters along as well, which I think is a bit different sort of here. But we just thought it was good to be able to have a whole-of-country solution. And it's also particularly helpful with government. So I think there's a few regulators and department, communications officials here. So that was the other reason for doing that.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you very, very much. More question? Okay.
Hi. As you know, or as somebody may know, since a couple of years ago, the SI-XML metadata has been protected. Now, that means that, well, the radio player metadata or the metadata that comes from the broadcasters that radio player carries is protected. That means that the third-party aggregator cannot do anything. So what is going to be the way for a third-party developer to access the metadata of the radio stations?
Okay, I'm not sure I completely understand the question. I
Yes.
mean,
For instance, in Spain, if I try to get the metadata of the stations that radio player carries, Radio Nacional, for instance,
Yeah.
it is protected. I cannot do an aggregator of all the radio stations based on that metadata.
Yeah.
So I tried, but I failed. So how can I, as an independent developer, do an application based on the radio player or the station's metadata that is protected under a walled garden by radio player?
I mean, I can talk sort of generally about that. So I think from a radio player perspective, it's important to us that the station's metadata that we have, we know, and the stations know, most importantly, where that's being used, how it's being used, what the application is, what the user experience is. We think that's incredibly important. So if it's a conversation about how can somebody work with Radio Player, we just want to have a conversation about that. And then if there's some kind of an agreement and we understand what the user experience is going to be, how it's being used, we'd be open to that. Okay. I can't talk on behalf of anyone else, but from a Radio Player perspective, that's the kind of understanding we need on behalf of the broadcasters.
Okay. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Okay. Other question? Now, question for Thomas. Is possible, Thomas? Yes? Okay. Has the car industry shown approval for this work? Do you understand me?
If the car industry have approved of this work?
Approvals, or do you say no problem?
I mean, we have been talking to the car industry, and as of course Laurence, you are talking with the car industry all the time. What we think we see when we talk with them is that they appreciate that we are clarifying what we want. It's much easier if we have kind of one voice, one perspective towards the car industry. So I think that was the start of this whole initiative that we began with, like not having multiple different approaches or ideas, to have one idea. And the radio itself is more and more something that the car industry really understands the value of. The apps is somewhat, I think the linking solution is something that they are really, a lot of car manufacturers that we have been talking are really excited about. And voice is a giant headache for them because it's so complicated, and we really need to push that in order to make it work properly. So in general, yes, they do really approve this idea.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Laurence. Thank you, Sonia. Thank you to all our speakers and to you for your questions.